Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another DMI What's Up Downtown Breakfast. I hope you guys are all doing well and enjoying the beautiful morning out there. Thank you for joining us virtually. We planned to be live at the Edgewater Hotel. Unfortunately, we had to change plans and we decided to go full virtual. So thank you very much for joining us. We really do appreciate everyone's understanding, and we are thankful for you all being here today for this really important presentation. We are extremely excited to hear from Aaron Birdbear from UW Tribal Relations. He's an amazing speaker, and he's going to talk about the extraordinary cultural importance of the Dejop in this area. It's a fantastic presentation. I've heard it before. I cannot wait. We're going to have time for question and answer at the end. So please, if you have questions, send them in either through the chat or the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to your questions at the end here before. But before we begin today's presentation, we want to say a hearty welcome to the new members of Downtown Madison Inc. There's a big group joining us this month. We're very excited to see so many of you, some back again and some new members as well. First, we've got Madison Property Management. Huge thanks to Kate Bloomfeld. We've got Madison Top Company and Aaron Frank. Summit Commercial Fitness, and our good friend, as I was going to say, Tim Nikolites, good to see you again. The Foundation for Black Women's Wellness and Aaliyah Stevenson, the soap opera, an institution on State Street, Stacy and Sean Scannell. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you with us. UBS Financial Services and Paul Vosberg. It's great, Paul. We really appreciate it. Vendura Industries, Michelle Cartman, and last but certainly not least, Wyden with Heather Reeder. We're excited about all of these new members for joining us. So thank you very, very much. Welcome to DMI. To continue today's performance, we want to make sure we thank the people that made this happen. We would not be here at our What's Up Downtown Breakfast without our major series sponsor, Wipfli LLP. Wipfli, you are fantastic. As always, we've got Anita Mohammed here, who is a partner with Wipfli and double duty, the treasurer of DMI's board of directors and an executive board member. Boy, Anita, we ask a lot of you. Good morning, Anita. How are you?
Good morning, Jason, and good morning, all. As Jason mentioned, my name is Anita Mohammed, and I'm a partner with Wipfli LLP and member of the DMI Board of Directors. Wipfli is pleased to participate as the major sponsor of the DMI What's Up Downtown Breakfast series, and I thank you all for joining us this morning. As a multidisciplinary professional services firm, Wipfli delivers effective, personalized services to help companies and organizations like yours through these trying times to help create lasting positive impact. We're here to help leaders like you navigate these ever-changing economic environments, and I invite you to visit wipfli.com for industry-specific insights for financial institutions, construction and real estate, nonprofits, and more. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed today's program.
Thanks, Anita, very much. Thanks for your continued partnership, and thank you for being our treasurer. No easy feat, so we really do appreciate it. Along with our friends at Wipfli, we've got several sponsors that are also here to help out. We've got Ho-Chunk Gaming Madison, Michael Best and Friedrich, the State Bank of Cross Plains, and our special contributors, the Edgewater Hotel, which we hope we're going to be back very soon, and UW Health, Unity Point Health, Meriter, and Courts. Thank you all so much for making this happen. Now, this month, we've got a very special monthly sponsor. We are so excited to have our great friends from the Cap Times and the editor and publisher, Paul Fanlin, here to discuss some amazing things that they're doing, both at the Cap Times and as a member of the EVU Foundation Board of Directors. He's going to say a few words, but I want to also put a plug in right now for the Cap Times Idea Fest, which is going to happen. The live part is going to happen on September 18th at Shannon Hall. We are so proud to be part of one of the discussions on what the future of downtown Madison will look like. We've got a great panel to discuss this inflection point and what's going to happen. Is Madison going to become a big little city or a little big city? Where are we right now? We've got a great panel discussion, so we're very, very thankful for Paul for that invitation. So please do join us on September 18th in Shannon Hall. And I know Paul, who's here with us right now, has got a few other announcements and a few great things to say about what's happening at the Cap Times. Good morning, Paul. How are you?
Thanks, Jason. I'm great, and thanks for those kind words. I want to take just a couple of minutes to urge you all to consider attending Cap Times Idea Fest. Jason mentioned the dates. I'll talk a little bit more. Whether you'd be returning or this would be your first time. This year, our event is hybrid. Last year, it was all virtual because of the pandemic. We will start to release online sessions starting Monday, September 13th. So we're getting close on build up to our crescendo in-person experience the following weekend, Friday night, September 17th, and as Jason said, Saturday, September 18th. For those of you who have never attended, we present our biggest events, all of our events actually this year in the UW Memorial Union, and use its biggest stage, Shannon Hall, where Jason's moderating the event on the future of downtown Madison. We're carefully examining safety protocols and will require masks, appropriate social distancing, perhaps even proof of vaccination. We're consulting with UW officials almost daily, so you can be sure that the event will be safe. So why go? Well, because the festival is now in its 5th year and has grown into, I think, a signature ideas festival for the Madison area. We feature huge national speakers as well as excellent local sessions like the one Jason mentioned on some of the most interesting and pressing local issues. And it's a hugely social event with food carts and an outdoor after event celebration. We have trivia, we have live music earlier in the week, a cooking event. We have a lot of fun and really reflect Madison. The national lineup, as it usually is stellar again. Courtesy of my friend and Cap Times devotee, David Marinis, the famous author and Pulitzer Prize winner. We have the Washington Post authors of the New York Times bestseller about the last year of the Trump presidency. Well, they'll be on stage Friday night. We have a huge session on climate change featuring 2 Pulitzer Prize winners from the Post, a reporter and photographer, who will actually project some images and have a discussion with David on Saturday morning. We have a national panel of journalists and athletes talking about the increasing intersection of sports and race. David will lead all of those chats, as he will a conversation with Jane Mayer, who many of you may know is a decorated investigative reporter for The New Yorker, who probably knows more about dark money and politics than any journalist in America. The local lineup is also powerful, highlighted by Jason's aforementioned session on the future of downtown. But we think we'll have really future-focused conversations, or we know we will, about housing, providing adequate housing in Madison, about the school achievement gap that has racial implications or connections, and about the future of policing with the new chief, and more and more. We're also having fun with a futurist talking about the future of work and sort of the great resignation, all of the folks who have decided to change their career path after the pandemic. I promise you that if you attend, you'll learn things, see friends, and have a great time. And besides, you'll be supporting a locally owned and run media institution that I run, that I think has given so much to Madison, both through our journalism over a whole century, but also through our philanthropy through the EVU Foundation. VIP tickets for the best seats are $60 for the entire fest. General admission is $10. CT members, and we hope more of you will consider becoming CT members, get 50% off those rates. You can find them at captimesideafest.com, where the entire detailed program will be posted and available in the next few days. Jason, thanks for the opportunity to speak today, and for all that DMI does for our beloved downtown Madison. So thank you.
Well, no, Paul, thank you. Honestly, thank you for your continued amazing stewardship in Madison. You and I have had a great friendship for years, and I just want to say thank you. The Cap Times is so important to have a robust media here in town, and you guys provide that with amazing, in-depth stories from Natalie or from Abby or for whoever it is. We're so thankful. And for all of you, I just want to put an exclamation point on what Paul said about the Cap Times Idea Fest. I've attended every year. It has been an amazing, amazing event to have a lineup of national speakers plus local speakers right there. Please do join us. We're really excited again to be part of it. We had a great panel last year on the future of retail which is probably still relevant today. And then this year we'll have the future of downtown. So Paul, thank you from all of us at Downtown Madison, Inc. And I hope to see all of you on either the 17th or 18th, or see you virtually for one of the sessions that they'll announce on the 13th as well. So Paul, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. Well, now on to the show. We have really, speaking of interesting presentations like the Cap Times Idea Fest, we are so thankful to have Aaron Birdbear here today from UW Tribal Relations to talk about the extraordinary cultural history of the Dejop here in the Isthmus and around the Isthmus. Aaron Birdbear began serving as the inaugural Tribal Relations Director, at UW-Madison in 2020 in the Office of University Relations and the Division of Extension. Aaron joined UW-Madison in 2000 to support the retention and graduation of American Indian and Alaska Native students at the university. In 2009, he began supporting historically underrepresented students in UW-Madison School of Education, and also worked to advance the school's efforts to integrate First Nation studies into pre-K through 16 education, including through the creation of the WisconsinFirstNations.org. Aaron received a physical oceanography BS degree from the University of Washington, Seattle, and an educational leadership policy analysis Master's of Science in UW-Madison. Aaron, good morning. I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. We are so excited for your presentation.
Right. Hanachara Haipi, Aaron Birdbear Gahini Gaide. And I was just saying, good morning. My name is Aaron Birdbear. It's nice to be here. And I just wanted to say hello in the Ho-Chunk language, since we're in the ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk. Wonderful to acknowledge their powerful language, which is so important to this continent. The Ho-Chunk language is just an incredibly influential language on this continent. We'll see that shortly. And unfortunately, my colleague Omar Polar, who's Sauk and Mole Ojibwe, the Sauk and Chippewa community, was unable to join us this morning due to some technical difficulties on their end. So Omar wishes everyone well. Just a reminder, here are the 12 Native nations of Wisconsin. Really important for us to understand. In my role at Tribal Relations at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, it's trying to advance our collaborations and connections with the Native nations of Wisconsin and ensure that our institution is responsive to the areas of interest that they have in the ways that we kind of encourage faculty to consider the particular kind of topics or issues that Native Americans are bringing forward, whether they be in health, the environment, education, all these different areas, business, hospitality. So just kind of reminder today that there are 12 Native nations of Wisconsin, a subset of the 574 federally recognized American Indian Alaska nations in the United States today. And there's additionally 63 state recognized Native American nations today. So just an incredibly diverse continent, and we're just in a really special part of it. Make sure I can forward here. And just a reminder about there are 7 different indigenous languages spoken by the 12 Native nations of Wisconsin. So they're incredibly culturally different from one another. They have different kind of creation stories. They have different kind of worldviews. Just a incredible group of indigenous peoples here in the state. And I kind of highlighted Ho-Chunk, the Ho-Chunk language, that they are one of the few tribes named after their own language because their language is so kind of central to who they are as a people, and it's really important to this continent. The Ho-Chunk language is the parent language of the Siouan language family. So as Latin is the parent language of the Romance language family, which we now have Italian, Portuguese, French, a few other languages in the Romance language family. Ho-Chunk is the parent language of the Siouan language family. So we have peoples of the plains, the Central Plains, who are all mostly part of the Siouan language family. And the Ho-Chunk language is kind of that kind of root language that's so important to our continent. And if we look here, if we go back in time, if you make a map at any point in time, you're going to have kind of different boundaries or different kind of areas and different peoples involved. And so we're going to walk ourselves through a little kind of timeline relatively recently in the human timescale of Dejop. And we'll kind of see just the kind of different peoples we would have encountered if we were in the Great Lakes, say in the 1760s. This is a 1760s trade map from Wisconsin Past and Present Historical Atlas, a really incredible book to own if you're living in Wisconsin, it really tells us many different kind of parts of our state history in graphical form, and it's just very useful in images and maps. And so here we have the trade routes. So you can see some dotted lines around the lakes and the rivers, and it just reminds us before we had, railroads and cars and highways, riverine travel, lake travel, really important. So here's a kind of riverine kind of map of getting around this place. And so we can see we have the Menominee, the Ho-Chunk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo. And this is already a kind of changed place. The fur trade economy has already begun. And the Great Haudenosaunee Confederacy of the Northeast is kind of putting pressure and pushing people into the Great Lakes. And so there's already been a shifting of humans by this point, as there's always been a kind of a shifting of humans as this continent has become more open for human occupation over time. And then if we fast forward to the 1800s, we see slightly different boundaries. And these are kind of the recognized treaty cession borders between indigenous nations of the Western Great Lakes and the United States government. So now we're seeing kind of treaty borders of land cessions, and these are violence-backed land cessions. Native Americans aren't giving up their ancestral land bases willingly. They're facing tremendous amounts of violence. And so violence-backed treaties is one strategy the United States uses to continue to expand on this continent. And so we kind of see these treaty-ceded borders of the Ojibwe, the Menominee, the Ho-Chunk, and the Potawatomi now kind of in the southern part of the state. There's also the Dakota, who are kind of in the western edge of the state along the Mississippi River. And so we can just get a sense of indigenous nations today. And this is an educator map from the ways.org website from public PBS Wisconsin. And just an incredibly great tool for teachers if they're thinking about, well, if I wanted to teach about a Native nation, which Native nation might I start with? We encourage people, well, on whose ancestral lands is your institution located? That's a very good starting point. So we can see the Ho-Chunk, the brown section of the map, and we can see the four lakes. Dejope is Ho-Chunk language for four lakes, and we can see the four lakes on this map. And if we think about the actual kind of place we're in, we can see some colored sections on this map, and we're going to focus on the kind of salmon color, or pink color, the orange color, and the tan color. We're going to ignore the purple color for the time being. But if we can see 1829, 1832, 1837 are the dates associated with the kind of pink color, the orange color, and the tan color. Those are the actual treaty dates, the treaty years when the Ho-Chunk ceded their lands to the United States, and they didn't do it willingly. In 1829, the first session is related to the 1827 Winnebago War, when there are lots of illegal squatters, thousands of illegal squatters on Ho-Chunk lands, accessing the resources of mineral resources that the Ho-Chunk themselves were part of a mining economy. And so we had thousands of illegal squatters penetrating into Ho-Chunk lands. It resulted in the Winnebago War of 1827. Unfortunately, the United States uses it as a land and resource grab, dispossessing the Ho-Chunk of their kind of mineral wealth in the southern part of the state. So 1829, but for us, 1832, September 15th, 1832, is the treaty that all of us are enjoying our treaty rights right now, if you're non-Ho-Chunk, that allowed US citizens to move into this place. And so treaty rights go both ways. US citizens still enjoy treaty rights, the right of occupancy conferred by the September 15th, 1832 treaty. And so this kind of reminds us how important of a day that is. And there hasn't been as transformative of a date for the living world of Dejope since the Ice Age. So the last time we had such tremendous change in the environment happened in the last glaciation period, since after 1832, the stewardship, land stewardship practices of the incoming United States citizens is very, very different than those stewardship practices of the Ho-Chunk. And we'll see a little bit more about that in a second. And then 1837 is the final treaty of lands within Wisconsin of the Ho-Chunk. So we can see in really short order the Ho-Chunk cede 10 million acres of their ancestral territories to the United States. And we're still benefiting from those treaty rights ourselves as US citizens today by living and working in Madison. So it just kind of reminds us about treaty history and a little bit about places we can see. Additionally, on this map, we can see some Ho-Chunk villages. And so you can see the village of Four Lakes, or Dejope itself. It's on the Isthmus. It's very small on this map. Old Turtle and Broken Arm. So Old Turtle, Dejope, or Four Lakes, and Broken Arm are now Middleton, Madison, and Monona, right? It's a lot easier to establish a place to live in a place that someone has worked the land for thousands of years prior to you. And then today, when we kind of think about the human story of Dejop, you know, UW-Madison is thought to be the most archaeologically rich campus in the United States. And it's because of the 12,000-year human story of Dejop. And so here is a kind of archaeological sites map of the lakeshore along Lake Mendola. And the Ho-Chunk have a name for Lake Mendola themselves. It's Waaksikhomik. Waaksikhomik is kind of refers to a water spirit in the lake and a story of human connection to that water spirit. And we can just see, you know, how special and how long humans have lived along the shores of Waaksikhomik or Lake Mendola. So we see habitation sites. We see these really important catalog burial sites. We can see these different kind of places that humans have kind of lived and celebrated community over thousands of years. So this is just a little snippet of the information we're learning about our place today. And we really benefited from a 2005 archaeological survey of campus. And so here we are 16 years later, and we've been very responsive to that archaeological survey in thinking about the powers of fulfilling the learning goals we have for our students at our campus. And teaching the full human story of this space is a really important part of the essential learning outcomes we have for students in terms of, you know, understanding the physical and natural world around us, understanding different cultures that are in the world. So we're really fortunate that we were able to complete this study, and it's changed how we as a campus community talk about ourselves. And so to get a sense of some of these places, this is just a quick snippet. You know, Natatorium and Eagle Heights are 8,000-year-old village sites. Picnic Point is 3,000-year-old village sites. The Porter Boathouse, the location of the Porter Boathouse in kind of Lakeshore dorms should be a National Register of Historic Places, considering the importance of that habitation site. A few other halls are built on undated village sites. And then the conical, linear, and effigy mounds, and we'll get to those in a second, but they're these massive monumental arts built on the landscape as burial sites. You know, we had at least, 14 of these conical, linear, and effigy mound burial sites that were destroyed under North Hall, Bascom Hall, near Knoll, Agriculture Hall. So we know that we kind of started obscuring the landscape a little bit in the development of campus. And then this is just a quick snapshot reminding us of what we call the receipts today. The young people call, show me the receipts. It's evidence from that 2005 archaeological survey that says, beginning, almost 15,000 years ago or 13,500 years ago, there's evidence for Paleo-Indian occupation in Dane County. Dane County, once again, the next few thousand years after that, there's still abundant kind of human evidence of living here. We go to that kind of middle archaic stage. We don't actually know much about that stage, but it's extraordinarily long. It's about half of the human story of this space. And then we kind of fast forward to the last couple thousand years, and we get to the kind of effigy mound culture and the mound builders that, bring a lot of attention to this region. So this just kind of walks us through, just reminding us of the many layers of human story here, and that we as a University of Wisconsin-Madison are now really interested in leveraging this for teaching and learning purposes. And so just a quick timeline, right? So we think about how long humans have been here. If we think about UW-Madison and UW of the University of the state of Wisconsin were co-created at the same time, along with the Historical Society, that 1848 to present is literally 1.4% of the human story of Dejop. So 98.6% of the human story of Dejop happens prior to the creation of statehood. So just remind us of how deep of a human story we have on campus in Madison to share. And so just reminds us of how new we are relatively as a US society in this region compared to how long humans have lived here overall. So this just gives a quick snapshot. It reminds us how new the United States really is, how new kind of the ways of being of Europeans and European Americans are in Dejop, and that 98.6% of that story is a predominantly indigenous story. There's some French along the way for a couple hundred years prior to the United States arriving in Wisconsin. And then here, once again, the receipts. So here's a wonderful map from Indian Mounds of Wisconsin, 2nd edition by Robert Birmingham and Amy Roseborough. And it shows 12,000 years ago, we did not have 4 lakes. We had one big lake, Lake Yahara. That's what we call it today in the kind of just terms that we've created for these regions. But we can see some dark triangles on this map, and those triangle sites are all evidence of human activity 12,000 years ago. Some very specific technologies were created that period of time, and we found those technologies all around this one big lake. And so there's some dotted lines. You can kind of see the borders of the 4 lakes today. At least 3 of the lakes are kind of really apparent in this map, but just reminding us that the landscape was very different 12,000 years ago from what it is today, and having one big lake, and that the isthmus was a chain of islands at this time, kind of between the Lake Mendola, Lake Monona. And so if you wonder why some of the places the isthmus flood in heavy rains over periods of time, we can get a sense, oh, that's the lowest part. You can see the lowest parts on this map, right? So just reminding us of the real special kind of place that humans decided to move into. Once the land was firm enough after glaciation, after tundra, after being very soggy for a long time, humans moved right in as soon as the land was able to sustain humans. Humans are here. And then when I mentioned these kind of large scale monumental art burial sites that we call conical, linear, and effigy mounds today, they are representative figures, at least the effigy mounds are. Effigy kind of means likeness as a word. And so here we kind of see these kind of representational kind of shapes that were built on the land. And we see in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see some pretty simplistic representations of a bird and a double-tailed water spirit. And that's in the floor of Dajope Residence Hall at the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. And that exact kind of representation is on the map to the left in the snow. We'll see the double-tailed water spirits poking out of the snow. And on the other side of the tree in that map is the bird effigy, which is hard to see. On the lower kind of picture that has leaves in it, we'll see leaves have been kind of raked off of the bent-winged goose that's near the natatorium. And the map on the lower right corner shows all the bent-winged geese representational figures that are burial sites that were created around the 4 lakes. And that the bent-winged goose is the signature effigy of the 4 lakes, meaning you won't find the bent-winged goose as a representational figure anywhere else but in the 4 lakes. So a really kind of special figure. And I think we see all those geese coming all the time to our town, and their incredible migratory world of moving back and forth on this continent. And so just a really special place. The double-tailed water spirit is thought to be a unique landform. Of the 20,000 of these monumental art burial sites have been documented, the double-tailed water spirit is thought to be unique. And so both of these sites, the bent-winged goose and the double-tailed water spirit, are nationally registered historic places today. They were nominated by the university about 15 years ago. So we're just trying to up our stewardship and protection of these important cultural sites, considering how rare and unique they are on this planet. And as we still don't fully understand what they culturally represent, we hope to protect and preserve them as much as we know how. And so just a reminder of what humans found when they came to Madison, at least US citizens, when they arrived and started exploring the Western Great Lakes in the 1820s and 1830s after the War of 1812. There's this kind of really impressionistic drawing from some early surveyors back in 1836. So this is an 1836 drawing of the Isthmus. And the Isthmus kind of runs, southwest to northeast. So it's kind of hard to tell from this drawing and orientation. But on the left side, I had circled, I thought I'd be at the Edgewater this morning. So it says where we are today. That is the Edgewater Hotel. If you go down the left side of the drawing, you'll see another hill, and it says like today's state capitol. If you're looking straight down on the earth as if you're a bird flying over it. So the left side of this drawing is basically Wisconsin Avenue that runs from the Edgewater to the Capitol. And we can see the high hills, and it says, oh, I can see all 4 lakes from this hill. So if you're near the Edgewater, about a couple hundred years ago, it would have been easy to see the landscape all around us from these high points. And so then if we go to the right of this kind of drawing, this impressionistic sketch, that is the Isthmus kind of running along. And on the far right side of the page, it says 3rd Lake in the lower right-hand corner. And that is the Yahara River, what we call the Yahara River today. But it is the little kind of just reminds us of where we're at in the map, in that the village of Dajope, which is on the kind of top right-hand corner, is basically where Tenney Park is today. And so the village of Dajope was in that region. But this map shows us the Isthmus is a highly developed. There are all these massive monumental kind of arts built onto the earth at this period of time. There's these large linear mounds that are kind of like walls of earth that kind of run down hills toward lakes. We have representational figures scattered throughout this map. And we see lots of conical mounds, these kind of burial sites that are shaped like in hemispherical kind of parts of the earth. So it just kind of reminds us that even when the first US surveyors came to town, they stumbled upon a really spectacular cultural center, that people had been convening in this place for thousands of years, and they've been leaving their mark on the land in ways of honoring, remembering people in their society. And the Ho-Chunk have suggested that, you know, the kind of importance of the Capitol Hill itself, where the state capitol is today, and they shared at the Mounds rallies that were happening a few years ago when there was a case before the Supreme Court of Wisconsin about whether or not a business was going to be allowed to destroy a conical mound that was on their property. And fortunately, that the Indian Mounds Protection Act was upheld in that case, preserving these important cultural sites. But in that kind of sharing of how important this land is during that rally, when the Ho-Chunk came to town to remind us about how special this cultural center is, they talked about the very unique qualities of what Capitol Hill is today. And at that rally, they shared how 88 of their ancestors were interred on Capitol Hill, and really important people in their society, and just wanted to remind us of how extraordinarily special this place is. And this kind of impressionistic drawing from 1836 kind of reminds us, oh my goodness, what an incredible, highly developed region this was. It wasn't, as the United States like to assert, often a wilderness in some way, shape, or form. It was a place that people had been coming and convening in for thousands of years. One of the things people don't remember, because it was destroyed so quickly in the formation of the city of Madison, was the dividing ridge. Dividing ridge used to be the most significant geological feature of our town. It was about an 8-story high wall of earth that was created in the last glaciation period. And so it was a narrow wall of earth. And that the map we have is kind of Park Street. We see kind of near where the zoo is located today, from kind of Park Street to the zoo, where the hospitals are, like St. Mary's and Meriter Hospital along Park Street. We see where the dividing ridge used to be located. And on top of the dividing ridge, once again, these kind of monumental art burial sites, the conical, linear, and effigy mounds, were built on top of this ridge. This ridge was destroyed to fill in all the marshes that were here in town. We saw that first map of the low areas. You wonder why parts of Madison flood, right? So much of Madison is landfill that used to be marshland. And so it just kind of reminds us, in order to fill in the land, you had to get the land from somewhere. And unfortunately, folks decided to use the dividing ridge as a major source of material to do landfill. And so this massive, 8-story wall of earth was tore down in the creation of Madison. So it just kind of reminds us of, wow, there used to be this really different kind of topography of this land, and on these massive and impressive geological features of land, humans had built these massive representational figures honoring people in their society in some way. And so if we think about, these monumental art burial sites that are around our beautiful region, we have kind of more detail today from like Spirits of the Earth, books by Robert Birmingham. His incredible work has really put this into the academic discourse, and finally having it in a kind of university press format allows us to discuss it in ways we weren't discussing the importance of this landscape before. But here, these dots around Lake Mendola, or Waaksikhomik from the Ho-Chunk language, are all these clusters of these large-scale monumental art burial sites. And so just one, the Woodland Shores group, is a really instructive group for us. And we can see it on the right. And you can see like bird shapes, looks like a bear, some canine shapes, some long walls, some linear mounds, some conical mounds, and some water spirits on the right side. And this particular group of these burial sites is so instructive because it shows kind of their kind of categorization or organization to some degree. Those that fly above the earth, those that are on the earth, and those that are below the earth. So, birds are above the earth. All these other animals are walking on the earth. And then there are some animals that are like water spirits, kind of below the earth to some degree. So just kind of thinking about that, and that there's a lot of functional placement. You won't find birds are usually placed on the high ground, and animals are kind of on the hills leading down, and linear mounds always kind of usually run down kind of hills in some way, shape, or form. So we can see just this kind of worldview expressed in the Woodland Shores group. And to give a sense of their size, we can see the bird's wingspan is about 200 feet in these cases. So they're pretty large scale representations. If you think about how we often build snow people or snow figures in the winter, and the effort it takes to build up, a 5 foot tall snow person. Now try to build a 5 foot tall bird that has a wingspan of 200 feet, out of earth. So pretty massive effort to create these incredible burial sites, recognizing people within their society. So just kind of gives us a sense of their beauty and their incredible scale. Now, the birds here on this map are not the biggest ones that were found on Waaksikhomik or Lake Mendola. That was on the northwest side of the lake, and there was a bird with a wingspan of 624 feet. So a bird with a wingspan of 624 feet. So we're talking massive representational figures on the earth. The largest bird effigy mound ever discovered in Wisconsin along the Wisconsin River had a wingspan of 1,300 feet. So 1,300 feet. So a massive monumental art built on the earth, recognizing someone as they're interred in that site. So just extraordinarily special that we have all these incredible cultural features of our landscape, although many of them have been destroyed today by housing development or building development or road development. But it just kind of reminds us of how special this cultural center is. And then one gets a sense of scale of how vast this kind of cultural expression on the earth. Here we have the 4 lakes themselves on the left map, and you can see all the dots around them. There used to be about 1,200 conical, linear, and effigy mounds around the 4 lakes themselves. They basically are at every high point around the lake, and the inlets and outlets of all the lakes. In the worldview of the mound builders, inlets and outlets were really important to them. So there's a lot of development around inlets and outlets. And then we can see as a kind of how broad and vast this cultural expression was within the state of Wisconsin, or what is Wisconsin today, is we can see it 41 of 72 counties. You'll find these cultural expressions in 41 of 72 counties. And we're really fortunate to live in one of the kind of cultural centers of that region. So we can see Dane County in the southern part of the map on the right, the grayscale county map. And you'll see some white dots in the middle of that gray kind of county of Dane County. And that's, once again, Lake Mendola and the other lakes here. So we can kind of understand that we're in a really dense area of development in comparison to some other parts of the state. The other dense area of development was down where the Wisconsin River meets the Mississippi River. And not only was it a major confluence of this massive highway called the Wisconsin River, it was also kind of the mining region of the Ho-Chunk. So I mentioned earlier about how there's that kind of mining conflict. So just really special. Once again, and if we think about the ecosystems of the region, we have the mound map repeated again on the left. And then we think about the different ecosystems that were here prior to the kind of introduction of different species who are non-indigenous trees or plants or animals to this region, like cows or other things. We see bur oak savanna and prairie systems here in the southern region. And these oak savanna and prairie systems were created through fire ecology practice over thousands of years. And so in opening up the land through repeated burning and controlled burning, something the United States is learning, maybe we should have been doing a lot of controlled burning over the last 100 years or so as a continent, that maybe would have been a proactive measure we could have done in returning to types of those practices of land stewardship. And so the oak savannas and prairie systems of southern Wisconsin were created through a lot of human intervention. And then in all those open spaces we'll find in the state, you see immediately kind of this cultural expression of conical, linear, and effigy mounds are located in these open spaces of the state. So it just kind of reminds us of the ecosystems that used to be here that were kind of stewarded and shaped by human intervention, and then where we'd find these kind of cultural expressions within the state. So just really kind of a amazing kind of thinking of time, development, and ecosystem all kind of coming together. And unfortunately, the bur oak savanna is extinct now today. That's an ecosystem that was destroyed in the creation of farmland in cities. There are small patches of bur oak savanna being restored on UW-Madison campus and other places in the state. But what was once the predominant ecosystem and all the animals and plants that kind of come with that ecosystem, the passenger pigeon, right? All these other kind of animals that might not be here today. And so, I just kind of ask us today, it's like, does Dejope fulfill the criteria for, a United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization World Heritage Site? Does it exhibit an important interchange of human values over a span of time within a cultural area? Are there monumental arts? Is there a cultural tradition to a civilization which is living or disappeared? And I always kind of joke, Ho-Chunk. Is there a landscape that illustrates significant stages in human history? Is traditional human settlement, land use, or sea use representative? I can't see that word, it's kind of hidden. Representative of a culture or human action with the environment? And I think we see that too. Is it directly or tangibly associated with events or living traditions? And I think we see the Ho-Chunk Nation today and their culture is probably descendants of mound builders. And so I think we can make that conclusion as well. So just really thinking about how special it is that the Day Jope kind of really fulfills multiple criteria of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization World Heritage Site criteria. And in order to be kind of nominated or at least considered, you only have to fulfill one criteria. And so we fulfill multiple criteria. Right? And what kind of hid the landscape? It's just important to remember that, in the creation of Wisconsin, it was created under this idea of settler colonialism, which is the United States as a whole. The United States, Canada, New Zealand, or Australia are all great examples of settler colonial societies who speak English. And they all have the kind of same philosophy of replacement. And so the organizing principle and goal of all settler colonial societies on the planet is replacement. So the organizing principle and goal of all settler colonial societies is replacement. So in this case, it's replacement of indigenous peoples. And often when you're trying to take over something, it's easy to dehumanize your enemy in some way. We have lots of slang terms for our enemies that we've used over time, US military. We think about the language we used in World War II or other periods of time of demeaning others. And that often helps us deal with the hard work of violent colonization. And so we see reflected in the state motto, and this was the first territorial motto of the state that became the first state seal for 1 year in 1848. And the motto of the state seal of Wisconsin is civilization succeeds barbarism. So we get a sense of that replacement underway immediately. And we have a graphic kind of novel in that seal on the left that shows indigenous peoples moving out to the west and new people coming in from the east. So indigenous people leading to the left, new people coming in from the right, and a terraforming of the landscape. I mentioned the Bur Oak Savanna as an extinct landscape for the most part in Wisconsin today. And then today we have a different landscape forward. Replacement is complete. We have no indigenous peoples in that, right? We have tools of extraction, tools of commerce, but we don't have indigenous peoples any longer. So just reminding us about how our cultural landscape becomes hidden. It's a function of settler colonialism since the goal is replacement. We can see indigenous dispossession really quickly. This is 82 years how quickly the United States dispossesses indigenous peoples of their lands on this continent. And so just kind of reminder how quickly of a process it really was to be able to develop the United States in this region. And so these are all the treaty by treaty. We can see kind of treaty sessions map being kind of enacted in a chronological way that this historian from the University of Georgia created for us. And then today, even Madison's story about indigenous peoples is very fascinating in that we focus on Black Hawk and the Sauk Nation much more than we do the Ho-Chunk Nation. And the Sauk, we saw those maps before, the Meskwaki and the Sauk and other peoples appeared on those maps. But we think about who's living here and over time, and we, instead of telling the story of the Ho-Chunk, we have lots of signs in our town telling the story of the Sauk. And it's because of the Black Hawk War, or it's not really a war, but a conflict, the Black Hawk conflict during the ethnic cleansing of Illinois. And it was such national news at the time, the Black Hawk War, that because of the prominence it has in US history as a nationally recognized kind of event, there's a lot of focus brought to it here in Madison, at the expense, unfortunately, of kind of bringing attention to the Ho-Chunk themselves, at least some kind of important coastal places. So we have Black Hawk monuments on campus, we got Black Hawk monuments on King Street, we got Black Hawk Country Club, we got the Black Hawk diagram on top of the Monona Terrace. So just fascinating that we have all this kind of acknowledgement of the Black Hawk, this person who came here one day kind of visit to our town has promoted so much kind of interest, but we often don't bring the same interest to indigenous leaders like Roaring Thunder of the Ho-Chunk or Glory of the Morning of the Ho-Chunk. Just kind of interesting how we focus on Sauk peoples who live 300 miles to the south of us, who speak a different language than the Ho-Chunk, instead of teaching about the Ho-Chunk who live in this particular place. And part of the difficulty of that story is the history of colonization, and that the United States spent 40 years trying to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. And here's that kind of story of resilience and resistance and love of place that the Ho-Chunk have And despite every effort to remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin, they returned. So ethnic cleansing failed in this case. And often it's tough to acknowledge this kind of type of story that we have a complicated history of a complicated shared past. But in order for us to move forward, we do have to acknowledge it in some way. And so how do we explain these behaviors in today's kind of light of equality for all people in our country? This is a very different kind of place and time in US history, where the United States is removing all indigenous peoples from east of the Mississippi to west of the Mississippi. So 60 indigenous nations are impacted by the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Most people know it as a Trail of Tears for the Cherokee, but it also impacts indigenous peoples in Wisconsin living east of Mississippi. In this case, the Ho-Chunk and Potawatomi in particular both faced campaigns of ethnic cleansing to remove them from the state. And that I mentioned it's a national thing. So here we see ethnic cleansing on a continental scale. We can see all the different ways indigenous peoples were forcibly moved off their ancestral lands to Indian territory at the time, which is now Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas. And we see the outcomes of that in the 2010 census. I get to update with the 2020 census data soon. But you can see the darker green sections on the county map of the United States on the lower figure are where you'll find indigenous peoples today. And so we see an ethnic cleansing of half of a continent and the kind of situating of those indigenous peoples in what is Oklahoma today in many ways. So just an incredibly violent kind of history of colonization, of removal, and a lot of suffering and misery kind of represented in this diagram. And the outcomes we have today as modern indigenous peoples and where we find ourselves within the continent today. And so today, UW-Madison, we have this wonderful research, we have this wonderful kind of understanding of how special this cultural center is. And the University of Wisconsin-Madison moved forward in asking the Ho-Chunk to help name a hall on campus. They named it Dajope Residence Hall after the kind of village that used to be where Tenney Park is in the Tenney Park region of the Isthmus. Within the floor work of Dajope Residence Hall are representations of all the effigy mound kind of groups that are on the Lakeshore itself. So from Picnic Point to Eagle Heights to Observatory Hill. We have these different representational figures that are built in. And the actual building itself is meant to reference the indigenous landscape around us. The building looks like a bird if you look directly down at Dajope Hall. So the wings look, the residential wings look like kind of wings of a bird, and the kind of dining area facilities kind of like tail feathers of a bird. So the entire building is meant to reference the incredible cultural center of monumental arts that are created in this region. So it's supposed to kind of fit in with the mounds that are around it in some way, shape, or form. So we as a campus community are trying to leverage this teaching and learning and advance it because we know it fulfills all these learning goals we have for students. And so instead of just thinking of 1848 forward and telling the story that way, we're like, let's go back to when humans first lived here. Oh, 12,000 years ago, we have that evidence. We all have this incredible growing understanding of how extraordinary of a cultural center we're living in. So just kind of showing us how we're moving to advancing that knowledge within our own community. So with that, we'll have a few minutes left, and I wanted to take any questions people might have. And I don't know how the host would like it. You put them in the the chat box or somewhere else. And so I can stop sharing now and we can kind of get to some question and answer.
Aaron, amazing. Such an interesting and important presentation. We are all very thankful. I've just been getting texts and chats galore about how amazing this presentation was. So Aaron, from all of us, thank you. We do, as Aaron mentioned, we've got plenty of time here for questions. So you can either send them in through the chat or through the Q&A function. I think the first question that I think many people have had that texted me is, how can they learn more and how can they engage in what's happening and learn more about this amazing history?
Yeah, Wisconsin firstnations.org, and I'll have to try to figure out how to quickly look it up on the website and then cut it up. Maybe.
Yeah, I got it in my notes, so I can put it in for you right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a starting point, right? A starting point. But there are books that are kind of really important. And the two books that really kind of started it all. Well, the first book is Indian Mounds of Wisconsin by Robert Birmingham. And then he had a follow-up book, Spirits of the Earth, the Effigy Mound Landscape of the Four Lakes. So Robert Birmingham was a former state archaeologist at the Wisconsin Historical Society. And Robert Birmingham finally put all this research that people had started a long time ago, Lyman Draper, Charles Brown, all these really important conservationists from the late 1800s and early 1900s had been documenting this work. So there's a lot of early documentation of the kind of effigy mound, conical linear mound landscape that's here. And so Robert Birmingham brought that together. So Indian Mounds of Wisconsin by Robert Birmingham and Leslie Eisenberg. The second edition includes Amy Roseborough. And then Spirits of the Earth, the effigy mound landscape of the Four Lakes. And all of those are through the University of Wisconsin Press. So if you went to Historical Society Press, in their shop, you'd be able to find these books through the Historical Society. So, and then if you want to know more about the Ho-Chunk, there's really a great visual history that has some really great essays within it, and it's called People of the Big Voice. So People of the Big Voice was a book that came out about 15 years ago, maybe. And Tom Jones is a Ho-Chunk faculty here at UW-Madison in the art department, and he's one of the contributors to this book. It has some wonderful essays kind of explaining a little bit about Ho-Chunk culture, but also shows photos of the Ho-Chunk in transition from their kind of way of being into kind of a hybrid kind of way of incorporating kind of traditions of U.S. manner of dressing and those kind of things. So real powerful kind of visual history and People of the Big Voice.
Awesome resources. And I got to say, a plug for you. You were really good at talking and also putting links in the chat. So no easy skill. So well done, Aaron. Well
yeah, I could have kept doing it, but I'm like, I'm gonna make a mistake. So I'm gonna take it.
We'll make sure this is all recorded. We'll make sure to get the right information if that's wrong. Another question, sort of in the same vein, are there many UW-Madison faculty now focused on the archaeological history of the Ho-Chunk? And are there classes offered in Ho-Chunk history or literature at UW?
Yep, from time to time we do. I mean, it's not consistently offered. Sometimes faculty go on sabbatical or take a break. Ho-Chunk history was taught by Professor Steve Kanchowitz in the history department, so a really exceptional course. Ho-Chunk language has been instructed by the language science faculty, so one could study Ho-Chunk language. There's no better way to understand indigenous people than to study their language. I mean, that is the key way one understands kind of how the kind of culture and how the interconnectivity and how people situate themselves in the living world than studying a language. So we've taught Ho-Chunk language over time, Ho-Chunk history. We have some Ho-Chunk PhD students on campus. So Kendra Greendeer, who's been teaching the Tribal Libraries, Archives, and Museums course in the Information School. Molly Polyot is an award-winning anthropology PhD student right now. So we have some really exceptional indigenous scholars from the Ho-Chunk Nation right now completing their PhDs. And so they've been able to provide a lot of guidance and input for us as a campus community. So there's a Mountain Wolf Woman. There's a different kind of books kind of that illuminate kind of Ho-Chunk life in some ways. So once again, the Wisconsin Historical Society Press, has wonderful books that one can find, like People of the Big Voice, or the other books that kind of showcase Ho-Chunk life. And there are Ho-Chunk scholars on campus today completing their PhDs, as well as we have one Ho-Chunk tenured faculty on campus, Tom Jones in the art department, who contributed to People of the Big Voice.
More great resources. Another question, I think we've had this in presentations, you and I, before. Why was the name changed from Dejop, D-E-J-O-P, excuse me, instead of T-E-E-J-O-P?
You're trying to, the Ho-Chunk was not a written language per se, and so the way we represent their language today with, the alphabet that we have, Dejop, it was like D-E-J-O-P-E, I think, is how Dejop Residence Hall is spelled. And that was just to make it easy on us to try to figure out how to say it. And unfortunately, most of you mispronounced that word anyway. We don't have a lot of D-E-J-O words in our English language. So the closest thing we have is like soup du jour, right? So everybody wants to say Dejop. They want to turn it into like a Z-H or something, And it's jump, it's hard J like jump, so it's Dejop. And so D-E-J-O-P-E, or the other version that the person put in the question and answer, it was simply to help us pronounce it, right? But even then we have a hard time because those combinations of letters aren't common in English. T-E-E-J-O-P is just how it's spelled kind of in the pronunciation guides that one has for how linguists and language science faculty today help us understand how words are pronounced. That spelling is more representative of how language science faculty represent the spelling of Dejop. And so we're all moving toward that spelling today, T-E-E-J-O-P. Instead of trying to come to these kind of compromised terms where we're just trying to help us pronounce them in some way. Instead of, no, we can just learn it and recognize, okay, this word has a pronunciation, we can figure it. We don't have to kind of have a middle ground of helping us pronounce this word in some way, shape, or form.
Well, that's great. I mean, just important to, now I know how to pronounce the name. So thank you, Dave, Jope, Hard J.
Hard J.
Question we've got here, I think is an important question for our audience, from our friend Gavin. Is there anything business through DMI can do to advance community education about the history? And what should downtown be doing to help inform the future?
Yeah, I kind of think about natural points, right? Treaty Day, September 15th, 1832, right? Could be a point that we acknowledge, wow, this is when we as US citizens are allowed to be here. This is the anniversary day of us being legally allowed to reside here versus the illegal squatters that resulted in that Winnebago War of 1827. And now we're legally allowed to be here. It's a really important recognition of this connection with the Ho-Chunk Nation and the treaty they signed with the United States, although they did it under duress. The other ways we could do, we think about Indigenous Peoples Day, which is now kind of recognized statewide. We've had a few Indigenous Peoples Day parades up State Street back in the day, just our small Native American campus community. But it might be nice to celebrate the indigeneity of this place around these kind of natural points like the Treaty Day or Indigenous Peoples Day, thinking about how special this place is. So I kind of think about the ways that we want to advance kind of an understanding of how special this place is. And sometimes there's natural entry points. The other things that we could do is we could start trying to normalize kind of Ho-Chunk language back in town, right? We could all start maybe having welcome or thank you signs in Ho-Chunk in some way, shape, or form, right? In your stores in some way, shape, or form. The Ho-Chunk have a beautiful visual language called applique. And although in order to use applique, you have to get permission from the Ho-Chunk to use applique, one could think about, how we could represent how the expressions of culture of the Ho-Chunk that were developed in this place over time. So I kind of think about those things, a greater awareness of how extraordinary special downtown itself is, right? The village of Dejope is on the Isthmus. The Capitol is this really important site of 88 revered leaders of the Ho-Chunk Nation. And additionally, all this development happens that radiates out from downtown Madison. So I kind of think celebrating indigeneity, natural entry points for us to do that, and also thinking about how we can normalize Indigenous language around town, that we just be more familiar. Instead of having these names like Lake Mendola, which is thought to be an Ojibwe word, but it's not. And based off of the word Mendola, Governor Farwell was making land speculation brochures, and they're called first, second, third, fourth lake by the United States at the time. That was not cool enough for land speculation brochures. So Farwell asked people to come up with names, and they did it very quickly. And so Mendola was thought to be an Ojibwe language word. It's not. And then they based a rhyming series of words off of that. So Mendota, Monona, Kaganza, Wabisa, Yahara, all 3-syllable words, all rhyme, all gibberish. So just kind of reminds us that, in the rapid colonization of replacement, that, sometimes we just willy-nilly create things out of kind of whole cloth. And so maybe understanding Waaksikhomik, or the names of Monona, which I can't pronounce yet, or Kaganza. So I think about normalizing Indigenous language and Indigenous placemaking, and to recognize that every kind of feature and area of this region had a name in Ho-Chunk. Maybe we could learn some Ho-Chunk language to connect us to the worldview that they developed in this place over thousands of years.
Aaron, fantastic ideas to end this presentation. An amazing presentation it was. And I know, there's a lot of work happening on places like Library Mall, right? And what can happen in the future of Library Mall. And I have to say, Brenda Gonzalez and Gary Brown and the team, Aaron, you're a huge part of that conversation with Amal Goya and several other people. So hopefully that's one place that this can happen. So Aaron Birdbear, thank you for this amazing presentation. I've rarely seen this many great comments and how informative and important this presentation was. It was recorded, so we will have this available on our YouTube channel soon. I'll send it out to all of you that certainly asked. We want to say a huge thank you to UW Tribal Relations and Aaron Birdbear for their great presentation today. Also, a huge thanks to all of our sponsors, Whipley LLP, Ho-Chunk Gaming Madison, Michael Best and Friedrich, the State Bank of Cross Plains, the Cap Times for this month. Enjoy Cap Times IDFS, the Edgewater Hotel, hopefully we'll be back soon, and UW Health, Unity Point Health, Mariner, and Quartz. Thank you again, Aaron. We will see all of you in a month's time. Hope you have a wonderful Labor Day. We'll talk to you soon. Enjoy the day and help keep support downtown. Talk to you soon now. Bye, everyone.